Is this the prison justice that so many of you speak of? In September 2019, Demarcus George and Mario Waters were both indicted on federal charges of sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of a minor. At the time of his arrest, Demarcus George was 28 years old and Mario Waters was around 32. Now, you might wonder, how did these guys get in all this trouble? Well, let's talk about it. According to reports, in February 2018, a 6-year-old was taken to Arkansas Children's Hospital by her mother. Now, the child was taken for a variety of symptoms, but while at Arkansas Children's Hospital, it was discovered that the child's symptoms were the result of gonorrhea and HIV. I'm just going to assume that if you're old enough to listen to this video, you are old enough to know what gonorrhea is. According to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, a former babysitter of the newspaper told police that the child actually had symptoms for several months before she was finally taken to Arkansas Children's Hospital, but the mother of the child was afraid that the child would be removed from her care if she took the child to the hospital, and they started investigating, so the mother just didn't take her. So that was in February 2018, but in June 2018, the child actually started showing different symptoms and was taken back to the hospital where she was at that point syphilis and chlamydia. So we have a 6-year-old who has now been diagnosed with syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, and HIV. And doctors at Children's Hospital knew this child wasn't born with HIV, so the only way that this child could have contracted HIV was through sexual contact. Police were able to interview the child, the victim in this case, and she was able to tell exactly who it was that did this to her. It was a man that she called Daddy, who was Demarcus George, the boyfriend of her mother, and a man that she called Uncle Red, who was Mario Waters. Now, the child also gave specific details of what the room looked like where this happened, which was a hotel room that she described in great detail, including decorations, pictures on the wall, and like the bed, everything, like where it happened. As it turns out, police believe that Demarcus George essentially pimped this 6-year-old out, and they were able to test Demarcus George and Mario Waters, and both of them had the STDs that the child had. Speaking specifically about HIV, and I don't have all the information, but I believe that there are medications that you can be put on that if you take care of yourself well enough, your HIV can be in a somewhat dormant state because it's not like full-blown AIDS, but that is something that could always be a problem for that child. Now, the other ones, chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea, are treated, and then you have those no longer. But it was Demarcus George that actually tested positive for HIV. So that is who it was that gave this 6-year-old child HIV. Now, I can see that Demarcus George was actually charged in state court. I cannot see that Devin Waters was charged in state court. Demarcus George pled guilty to second-degree SA and was sentenced to 30 years in prison in state court, but that sentence is to run concurrent with his sentence for federal court. Now, for federal court, they were both charged sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of a minor. So Demarcus George actually pled guilty to the conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of a minor in November of 2021. So federal prison is a little bit different than state prison. In federal prison, there is kind of like a baseline of what sentence a crime might have, but then you have enhancements, which can enhance your sentence, and then you have reductions, of course, that could reduce your sentence. So Demarcus George got 2 enhancements, one because he was a parent or guardian of the victim, in this case, gross, and the second one was because the offense involved the commission of a sex act. He got a reduction because he admitted guilt in this case, and that's a common reduction. I think a big part of the sentencing for Demarcus George was because Demarcus George was the one that infected the victim with HIV. Demarcus George was sentenced to life in federal prison. So the 30-year state sentence, it really doesn't matter because he's not expected to get out of federal prison. There was actually a major issue in Mario Waters' case where the defense attorney was let go by the judge. The defense attorney, it turned out, did not explain the pre-sentencing guidelines or whatever it was to Mario Waters ahead of time in detail. And Mario Waters actually did not see it until the day before he was to go to court. The automatically called out the defense attorney for not doing his job and basically just sent him packing. So Mario Waters had to be given another attorney and had to go through the process all over again. And I do want to say that Mario Waters told the court that these actions were basically something that was headed by Demarcus George. And he even said at one point, Demarcus George held a gun to his head. That being said, the victim in the case told police that Demarcus George let Mario Waters come over. Mario Waters performed acts on her and then gave Demarcus George money. So take that for what you will. So Mario Waters also pled guilty to conspiracy to commit sex trafficking involving a minor. His sentencing hearing was pretty rough. It seemed like the judge went back and forth battling really what sentence he should give Mario Waters. He said that had Mario Waters been sentenced first in his court, he would have given him a life sentence, but Demarcus George was sentenced first in court, and Demarcus George was the one that infected the girl with HIV. And so he wrestled with the idea of giving Mario Waters the same sentence that he gave Demarcus George when Mario Waters, yes, may have infected the girl with an STI or whatever, but it wasn't HIV. The recommended sentencing range for Mario Waters was 234 to 293 months in federal prison, which would have been, I don't know, up to just under 25 years in prison. And just a reminder, federal prison is different than Arkansas State Prison. Arkansas State Prison, up until now, I don't know how the new laws will affect it, but people would serve a small portion of their sentence. Federal prison, you have to serve at least 85% of your prison before you're eligible for release. So you would have had to serve a good portion of that 25 years. I do want to share a few things that were said during that sentencing hearing. At one point, the judge said, I've been going back and forth on this. Mr. George is the boyfriend of the mother who is pimping out a 6-year-old girl. Mr. George is the one making the little girl available. Mr. Waters has a baby with the sister of Mr. George. So the little girl refers to him as her uncle and to George as her daddy, and both of them are having sex with her. Now, for the federal prosecutor's part, she said, I don't want the court to forget Mr. Waters gave her gonorrhea and chlamydia. I know that's not HIV, but it's still STDs for which she had to receive treatment. I don't think this case teeters on the fact that Mr. George gave her HIV and Mr. Waters didn't. She also said, should the John, Mr. Waters, be treated differently than the pimp when he engaged in the exact same behavior? So last March, Mario Waters was sentenced to life in federal prison, the same sentence as Demarcus George, without the 30-year state sentence, which really is neither here nor there. Another thing that I found was interesting is that the article that I read notes that the court did not put a computer restriction in place, but the judge actually said the likelihood of you ever getting out are slim, and if you do, it'll be so far in the future that none of this will even matter. Well, that judge was right. On Monday, January 15th, news came out that Mario Waters, who had been in prison at Terre Haute, I probably mispronounced that, but he had been at prison at Terre Haute, a federal prison facility, had died after an altercation with another inmate. Excuse me, it actually said perceived altercation with another inmate. It seems that prison guards found him after an alleged altercation. They did attempt life-saving measures, but he just did not survive. So that judge was correct. He didn't make it out of prison. Now, I did see that this is the second death since December that has been reported from Terre Haute. Now, I do want to say, because a lot of people will wonder what happened to the victim in this case. The victim in this case was actually taken from her mother's care, and she was adopted. Her adopted family did actually speak in court on her behalf whenever Mario Waters was sentenced. So I think let's just keep her in our thoughts and prayers as she goes on with her life while Mario Waters didn't get to, and we'll see what happens with Demarcus George.